because the New York Times, the paper of record, now admits that the Biden laptop, falsely called Russian disinformation by many, many people, is authentic. So definitely a bit of a bombshell, although it was pretty obvious to myself and I think you as well, Zach, from the beginning that this was a legitimate. But yeah, let's take a look at Glenn's article. And then I specifically want to take a look at TYT's coverage of this whole situation, both their coverage now that it's been officially confirmed by the New York Times, but also back before it was officially confirmed, and specifically as it related to Glenn Greenwald and his exit from the Intercept, which essentially was over this exact issue, right? But we'll get into all that in a second. Anyway, Glenn Greenwald reports one of the most successful disinformation campaigns in modern American electoral history occurred in the weeks prior to the 2020 presidential election. On October 14th, less than 3 weeks before Americans were set to vote, the nation's oldest newspaper, the New York Post, began publishing a series of reports about the business dealings of the Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden and his son Hunter in countries which Biden, as vice president, wielded considerable influence, including Ukraine and China, and would again if elected president. Obviously, that turned out to be very true. The backlash against this reporting was immediate and intense, leading to the suppression of the story by U.S. corporate media outlets and censorship of the story by leading Silicon Valley monopolies. This disinformation campaign against the reporting was led by the CIA's all but official spokesperson, Natasha Bertnard. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Then of Politico, now with CNN, whose article on October 19th appeared under this headline, Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former Intel officials say, and this was a line that was parroted across mainstream media.
And Psaki said that.
Right, everyone said that. Basically, just the go-to line every time something comes out that they don't want to have reported on or exposed. Oh, it was Russian disinformation. You know, no word, no, nothing to see here. Move on.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, it's one of those things where we kind of called this months ago too, where you look at this, it's obviously correct. It's obviously a real laptop. It's Hunter Biden. It's super incriminating. There's no real way about it, but they're so wrapped up in this like Russiagate pathology, they're willing to spit whatever former Intel officials say back to the public, whatever creates their narrative. They want Trump to lose. They don't want anything that will stand in the way of Joe Biden's election chances. So they label it fucking, you know, all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation and all that shit, which was peddled. The White House press secretary, all kinds of newsrooms across the country said the same thing. And all kinds of people on Twitter that should have known fucking better did the same thing. And we were over here like saying like, this looks real. I don't know. It's the most important news, but it's definitely real. And now as you've seen the fucking, you know, last couple of years unfold, the Ukrainian situation has reared its head again. Now you're like, oh, well, this is why mainstream media didn't want people thinking about this, knowing about this. They don't want people to understand the lengthy back history between Joe Biden and Ukrainian oligarchs and places like Burisma. And why were they paying his kid like $50,000 a month or something? His crackhead child. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not fucking demeaning people who struggle with the drug abuse, right? Like, that's fine. But let's not pretend that Hunter Biden didn't have every opportunity to succeed and still fuck up, and then only through sheer nepotism get that position at Burisma. Of course he did, right? You know, and the reason why I'm extra hard on the guy is because his fucking father, who he's, you know, warmly embracing right here, it appears, would put fucking kids in jail for their whole fucking life for crack. Okay, literally wrote the bill that would put you 3 strikes, all that shit. You remember that? That was his daddy. Okay, what the fuck?
But let's take a listen to some of TYT's coverage. They put out this video, I think yesterday, reporting on this new development. And I want to contrast their tone in this video with a video they put out in November 7th of 2020 when Glenn Greenwald left The Intercept, essentially over this exact story and him calling it correctly at the time. So let's take a listen to this video, and then not the whole video, we'll watch some of it, and then we'll move on to the one from over a year ago. But yeah, let's take a listen here. Let's check it out.
Turns out that Hunter Biden is still experiencing a Justice Department investigation on 2 separate issues. One of those issues is the idea that he failed to pay taxes on earnings from jobs he did in foreign countries. Turns out he later paid $1 million in back taxes. Super scintillating story. The other issue has to do with him possibly failing to file as a foreign agent while he was working for companies in other countries. So let's start off with his laptop, of course. Turns out that there are emails that were retrieved from a laptop that he left behind at a repair store. And
this wasn't news months ago.
Changes. We learn a little more about his back and forth with a business partner in regard to whether they should file as foreign agents. So prosecutors have also asked about potential FARA violations by Washington consulting firm Blue Star Strategies that worked for the Ukrainian energy company in an arrangement that Biden helped broker, according to documents and the people familiar with the investigation.
Of course, the dogs is a big plus. Everybody loves that we get to work with dogs every day. I mean, that's the big bonus of all of it. We focus on.
Now, let's talk about the emails. According to reporting from the New York Times, in the April 2014 email, Hunter Biden indicated that Burisma's officials, quote, need to know in no uncertain terms that we will not and cannot intervene directly with domestic policymakers and that we need to abide by the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA, and any other US laws in the strictest sense across the board. Whoa, that seems bad.
Yeah, Anna, that's my point. That's my point.
Okay, I just want you guys to briefly consider, right? This is TYT after all. How would they be reporting on this if you swapped the names and nothing else? You could just, I swear to God, they probably wouldn't even notice if you just put 2 pieces of paper in front of them. And instead of having the name Hunter and Joe Biden, you just had Donald and Don Jr. in those fucking positions right there. Oh, is it the smoking gun Cenk would have been looking for the past 4 fucking years? Is he fucking longer than that now? Jesus Christ, 6 years that they've died on the Russiagate Hill? Are you fucking kidding me? They would have the 10, 15 clips, breaking, smoking gun, Trump's going down, DOJ involved. You know, and then they would be making all of these things like oh, Trump's own DOJ is turning on him.
The walls are closing in.
Exactly. It would have been all wall-to-wall coverage of that kind of shit, right? And Gavin and I would have been here being like, yeah, this is a story. It's corrupt as shit. We already told you a million times Donald Trump is corrupt as shit. We already told you that, you know, this was real corruption, blah, blah, blah. But if we want to get him on something, we have way more, like, you know, things to get him on the emoluments clause. We went all over this. This is literally documented on our channel. Okay, we talked about this a lot back then. But anyway, just completely ridiculous the way that they completely shift how they cover this after trying to portray themselves as like not a Democrat affiliate. Obviously, they're running cover for Joe.
Yeah, they pretend to be above partisanship until it comes to an instance like this, in which they're the most fucking partisan losers of all time. It kind of reminds me of the whole when Hillary was under federal investigation for her use of a private email server. It's the exact same thing. A lot of you know, commentators on the left, a lot of like democratically aligned commentators were like, oh, it's no big deal, man. It's nothing to see here. It's like, it kind of is a big deal, dude. And if the shoe was on the other foot, if a Republican were doing that, obviously you'd be calling them out for a brazen violation of their ethical responsibilities. Like, it's just annoying when the partisan blinders are so thick that they can't just be like, yeah, this is worth talking about. Obviously, this man's about to potentially be one of the most powerful people, if not the most powerful person in the entire world. Maybe we should look into his son's corrupt dealings in a country which, guess what, has proven to have major geopolitical fucking, you know, relations here now that the Biden presidency is underway. So anyway, let's take a little bit more look at this video. And then, like I said, I want to go back in time over a year and check out their video from November 7th of 2020. But yeah, let's listen to just a bit more of this.
So let me weigh in on this story. We now have firm conclusions. Hunter Biden and his laptop. Okay, first, let me just declare our bias in this case is approximately 0%.
Liar.
We don't give a damn about Hunter Biden. We don't care if he's innocent. We don't care if he's guilty.
He ain't my hero.
He just opened up, I think, let me lie to you.
Hunter Biden, Republican.
Yeah, so you just heard that. Oh, Jenks, he's above the partisanship. He don't give a fuck. this is all just, calling balls and strikes. We don't care about Joe Biden. We're team progressive over here at TYT.
Country Western Cenk.
Yeah, exactly. So you guys saw that. I think you get the gist. Now that it's officially been, the New York Times is weighed in. Now Cenk's like, what do you mean? We've always been right on this. Let's take a look back in time. Like I said, let's go back in the time machine to November 7th of 2020. I'm sure you guys remember when Glenn Greenwald left the Intercept because he basically tried to write an article about the situation as it was actually happening. And he got this really condescending note from their editor saying like, this isn't quite vetted properly, or like your journalism isn't quite up to par. You need to do some more fact checking and make less declarative statements and all this bullshit. When the whole Glenn Greenwald's contract from the beginning of the Intercept specified that he wasn't supposed to be having to deal with an editor in that sense. He was supposed to be able to write the articles that he wanted to and maybe editorialize a little bit too. It's not like everything he necessarily says is 100% a declaration of fact. It's Glenn Greenwald's writing. I think everyone understands that. But the point is that he was 100% correct, although at the time TYT wasn't quite willing to give him that credit, and that's demonstrated right now in a video that I'm about to play. Did you want to share this real quick, Zac?
Yeah, it was basically just backing up exactly what you said. So I've just grabbed the tweet from when Glenn formally tendered his resignation. My resignation from the Intercept, the same trends of repression, censorship, and ideological homogeneity. I can't read. Plaguing the national press generally have engulfed the media outlet I co-founded, culminating in censorship of my own articles. I got to email Glenn and be like, can you use like smaller words so that I can read them on my podcast? The final precipitating cause is that the Intercept's editors censored an article I wrote this week, refusing to publish it unless I removed all sections critical of Joe Biden, the candidate vehemently supported by all Intercept editors involved in this effort at suppression. I did go ahead and look. It looks like the only name he names is Betsy Reed, who's the editor-in-chief, and obviously would have had the final say on it, at least in the thread that I saw. None of the conflict had anything to do with the Intercept Brazil, whose journalism I continue to have the highest regard for and hope it remains supported. Jeremy Scahill is in the same position as I, not part of these decisions at all. But either way, just wanted to clarify everything for everybody. He basically got fucked all the way up to the top by the editor-in-chief, from the publication he founded, and basically is only known about because of the journalism that him and a few like Laura Poitras did with Edward Snowden. So anyway.
Right. And also I did just look it up. It looks like the editor was Peter Maas, M-A-A-S, Peter M-A-A-S. That was the editor which interfered or tried to interfere with Glenn Greenwald's original piece. And of course, that precipitated his exit entirely from the Intercept, a publication he co-founded some years ago. And he went off and,
Could you imagine thinking that was a good professional idea?
I know, right? It's crazy. Anyway, he started a Substack and the rest is history. But yeah, let's take a listen to what TYT was sounding like at the time that actually went down and see what kind of charitability they gave Glenn Greenwald, and an issue which now, of course, he's been completely and utterly vindicated on. But yeah, let's take a listen.
China. So I wouldn't say the story's not at all verified, but I certainly wouldn't say the story's verified. I wouldn't want a giant story going, oh my God, what a huge earthquake here in this election. And honestly, Glenn is obsessed with Russia. And I've said that to his face, and if it comes on, I'll say it again to his face. So he goes on a tangent about how people are saying that this might be a Russian operation. You want to criticize that? I'm with you. I don't see any reason why this is a Russian operation. And so you've got to present evidence, and they haven't presented evidence of that. So if you wanted to make that point, that's not that controversial point at all, right? But then to turn around and make it seem like this is a giant land-breaking story right before the election, well, it misses the context so much that I fear that it becomes purposely misleading. So I'll give you an example, and it's the same one we've been talking about here, but in a different context, the Alex Morse case. So Alex Morse, the progressive candidate in Massachusetts, he's running against a terrible corporate Democrat. He was in the primary. And right before the election, a story got leaked about how Alex Morse was hitting on students at colleges, right? Alex happens to be gay, and so there was a little bit of a homophobic strain to that accusation.
So just to interject here, Cenk is, and again, this was from 2020, Cenk is literally comparing the release of Hunter Biden's emails, which basically exposed his corruption as Joe Biden's son. He's comparing that to the disingenuous smear campaign against progressive Democrat Alex Morse, who was unfairly labeled some sort of predator because he had a relationship with, someone that he went to the same school as or something, that he taught at, rather. It wasn't even a student. He didn't even hit on them, etc. Absolutely no comparison there. Literally no comparison. One thing is something that voters absolutely should know about before potentially voting for this guy, Joe Biden. I think we deserve to know if his son was involved in some sketchy, shady corruption. And who cares if it's 2 weeks before the election? Like, what? Why does that matter? It could have been released at any point. Who cares? People deserve to know that. And you're acting like, oh, this is some sort of smear against Joe Biden that was, leaked by the Russians, or I guess not the Russians. To his credit, he did, do away with that notion. But still, acting like this is some sort of like sneaky psyop kind of thing. Like, oh, this was the broader context reveals that this is actually just a smear campaign against Joe Biden. When now, all these months later, we found out that no, it wasn't a smear campaign against Biden. I mean, sure, it was opposition research like every competent campaign engages in, but it wasn't a smear. It was all 100% correct. It was all 100% correct here. And the story that Cenk and Anna completely missed on was not the fact that it was released 2 weeks before the election. The story was that it was censored by the media, which clearly is in bed with the Democratic establishment 2 weeks before the election. Can you imagine if the shoe was on the other foot? Like, the story here is that the Democratic Party, in collusion with the mainstream media, censored this information, censored this article. You couldn't even share the link on Twitter. They labeled it Russian information, misinformation. They labeled true, actual information about Joe Biden and his son as Russian disinformation, and stopped people from sharing it in a prevent to ensure Joe Biden's victory. How is that not the obvious story here? Like, this is Orwellian level censorship. This is like what they do in fucking China. This is insane. For you to sit here and completely and utterly miss the point, and while you're at it, smear Glenn Greenwald and pretend like he wouldn't know what's legitimate information. Are you familiar with his credentials? Are you familiar with the Edward Snowden story? So to sit here and act like, oh, Glenn Greenwald's just some dumbass that doesn't know what information should be trusted and what's disinformation. He's just some moron. Like, no, this is a serious credentialed journalist, the level of which you will never achieve, Cenk. How fucking dare you? You owe him an apology.
Yeah, I mean, you can unpack this for so many fucking hours, right? Because there's so many layers to what goes wrong in the American media discord, all the way from mainstream neoliberalism to this, like, weird, like, corporate progressivism that we've seen the Young Turks kind of adopt in the age of the Biden administration. It's really strange. But yeah, you made the exact a point that I was going to make, which is that the real fucking story here is the fact that the internet was able to collude to ban the New York Post for something that was 100% true, shut down and silence any dissent or discussion on the internet about this, pretend or plant these completely substanceless and evidenceless based claims that this was somehow Russian disinformation, right? When it completely was not. It was obviously real, right? It was obviously real. You look at that laptop. Who fucking took those pictures of Hunter Biden, a fucking Russian agent? Give me a fucking break, okay? Yeah, twist my arm to believe that a crack addict's not that smart at encrypting his laptop, okay? Yeah, maybe he fucking forgot it somewhere. And look, I don't mean to mean the guy for his fucking struggles. I'm just telling you that when you're on crack or any of the other kind of drugs that fuck up your teeth like meth, you're gonna forget a lot of shit when you're done with it. So of course, he probably wasn't taking all of these precautions. It didn't even look like he was encrypting any of his emails when he was talking about literal financial crimes. Okay, not the sharpest tool in the shed. You can easily look at this if you know what you're looking for and be like, yeah, this is shady corruption. So again, I want everybody to imagine for like 30 seconds as Cenk tries to portray himself as this like unbiased like federer of information, because he's not going to just outright label it Russian disinformation with no evidence. Oh, okay, now that sets the table as if I'm like a neutral arbiter of what's happening, when it absolutely doesn't. And again, not to make the same point twice, but had this been Donald Trump with Don Jr. and the entire internet 2 weeks before the election, you had Twitter, Facebook, all coming together to remove a damning collection of Don Jr. doing crack and having like a bunch of ties to the let's say the Saudis or the Russian government, right, instead of Ukraine. Holy shit, guys. Cenk would be pulling out his hair. He would be talking about how this is an abomination, all things. I would also be doing that. It's just I'm still doing it now. And yeah, you're 100% right that they need to run a retraction. They need to do an open-mouthed apology, which of course they'll never fucking do. But it's just completely absurd to me that people are just gonna backpedal on this and be like, oh, maybe there was something serious to this, and it creates this weird trap where we fall into the corporate framing that financial crimes aren't that serious, right? Like, oh, the nepotism that is evoked by those most in our highest offices is like, oh, that's trivial news, right? So even people who I like their coverage, like Crystal and Sagar, they were apologizing for covering this. They were like, oh, this isn't the most important news. I'm like, guys, obviously I run half the Vanguard, so I'm not here to preach about oh, you got to cover them up, but they want you to think that this is unserious because it's their corruption, right? This is a bold-faced example of what the haves can do, right? Everybody loves to quote the old Carlin joke, it's a big club and you ain't in it, right? Well, the people who are in this fucking club are corrupt as shit, and their kids get put on board for $50,000 a month, and they can come up with $1 million to pay off the IRS with somehow, even though he has absolutely no skills, and I don't even think he's smarter than a very dumb fourth grader. So I just think that all of these things we have to consider on top of the extremely censorious, Twitter storm, all the. Why in the face of this, guys, now I'm looking at anybody who cheerled for fucking censorship on the internet in any kind of vague way, guys, during COVID and during the Joe Rogan meltdown and during all these things. Do you not understand that you're just emboldening them to lie to us and curate the news we get right before an election again? That's exactly what's going to happen, and that's the tools that we're giving. This is all so fucked. There's this is we saved this for the end for a reason. This is the fucking important story.
Right. And for Cenk and Anna to sit here and be like, well, our issue with this is that that Glenn is making too many declarative statements and that he's really, over the top in his wording. It's like, I remember when you guys were covering Russiagate day in and day out saying, oh, the walls are closing in, tick, 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 tick. Bob Mueller is going to come out and take down Trump and all this stupid bullshit, making declarative statements like there was no fucking tomorrow. For you to turn around and again accuse Glenn Greenwald, an actual journalist who was 100% right on this issue, of just being some sort of, mouthpiece for the right wing, and he's a useful idiot and he's just covering this because it's sensational and because he hates Joe Biden or whatever. No, it's not Glenn Greenwald. What's that quote you said? Glenn Greenwald quote. It's it's not my excuse to protect your dog shit candidate.
Yeah, he had this quote that I wrote down one time when this was all going down. He was like, it's not my job to help your bullshit candidate win this election. I was like,
right. It's not any journalist's job to protect any candidate, Republican or Democrat. It is their job to report on the information, regardless of when it comes out. And yeah, opposition research is nothing new. Pretty much, there's always some big dump, some huge crazy dump. What do they call it? The October surprise or something? That's nothing new, motherfucker. Stop acting like this is crazy. And again, I feel like everyone just moved on way too quickly from how insane the censorship was of this article when it came out. Again, it would be one thing. I would still be against it in principle if they had censored this article and it actually had turned out to be fake. Say the Hunter Biden laptop thing actually had turned out to be fake and it was just manufactured by Rudy Giuliani and the Russians or whatever. I would still be against them censoring it, but at least then they would be like, all right, well, we censored it because it was fake and here's the proof, etc. No, this was all legit. And we're finding it out now over a year later. It's it was all 100% legit, and they straight up censored it. They didn't deplatform it. They actually censored it. They stopped people from sharing the link. Do you not understand what kind of precedent this sets? Are you what? And again, for Cenk and Anna, their whole shtick is anti-corruption, anti-big money in politics, and they're going to sit here and wash over this huge story about corruption when it was actually happening, only for them to come out a couple years later and be like, we're not fucking partisan hacks. We're honest commentators and we tell it like it is. Bullshit. You guys are so full of dog shit. It's insane that anyone defends these fucking clowns or takes their coverage on anything seriously.